A partir de la maestría hice mi emprendimiento y hoy mi emprendimiento ya se está convirtiendo en una empresa. La maestría me dio las bases para crear un emprendimiento de una manera consolidada y enfocada. La parte creativa es muy importante, pero si no tienes todo el plan estratégico y cómo vas a llegar a ser un emprendimiento funcional, no sirve de nada. Soy Nelly y estudié la maestría en negocios, innovación y creatividad en Centro. A partir de la maestría hice mi emprendimiento y hoy mi emprendimiento ya se está convirtiendo en una empresa. La maestría me dio las bases para crear un emprendimiento de una manera consolidada y enfocada. La parte creativa es muy importante, pero si no tienes todo el plan estratégico y cómo vas a llegar a ser un emprendimiento funcional, no sirve de nada. Soy Nelly y estudié la maestría en negocios, innovación y creatividad en Centro.
Bueno, ¿ya me escuchan? Ya. Bienvenidos a Centro. Nosotros somos el área de posgrados, ¿no? Estamos representando a las maestrías en negocios, maestrías en educación y también le damos la más cordial bienvenida a estudiantes de licenciatura de código creativo, se llama su comunicación creativa. Muchísimas gracias, Denis. Y a los invitados que están aquí también, que acudieron a nuestro registro para escuchar a Tiago Forte. La verdad es que estamos muy contentos en Centro en recibir a estos conferencistas, a esta gente de la industria, hacer todos los eventos que estamos haciendo para ustedes, porque creemos que el ADN principal de Centro, además de su estudio, por supuesto, es el modelo educativo. El modelo educativo que los lleva a una inmersión en la industria, a un networking con la industria y a escuchar, ¿no? Y a estar presentes en todo lo que está sucediendo en el mundo actual. Agradecemos profundamente a Tiago el haber pues contactado también a Centro para elegirnos como institución y poder platicar aquí de su metodología y su segundo, de su libro, ¿no? De su segundo cerebro. Entonces, me voy a permitir leer la bio de Tiago. Tiago Forte es uno de los principales expertos en productividad a nivel internacional y ha enseñado a miles de personas en todo el mundo cómo los principios atemporales y la tecnología más avanzada pueden revolucionar su productividad, creatividad, memoria y eficacia personal. Ha colaborado con organizaciones como Genentech, Toyota Motor Corporation y el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo. Además, ha aparecido en diversas publicaciones como The New York Times, The Atlantic y Harvard Business Review. Es asesor de grandes corporativos como Google Inc. y autor de Método, una guía para simplificar, organizar y controlar tu vida digital. Libro, Crea tu propio cerebro. Muchísimas gracias, bienvenidos. Esta conferencia será en inglés y habrá tiempos de preguntas y respuestas, ¿ok?
Gracias. Hablo un poco de español, pero todo el día ayer hice entrevistas en español. Entonces, esa parte de mi cerebro ya no funciona más. So I'm going to do this in English. This is a really special talk for me for several different reasons, which I'd like to share with you. I've also been talking a lot, so I'm going to be doing a lot of drinking water. When I wrote the proposal for this book, which was the proposal that was acquired by a publisher and published, I was here. I was living here in Mexico City with my wife, Lauren, who is Mexican-American. We had an apartment, beautiful apartment, over in Roma. We lived here all of 2019. We moved here because we wanted to experience Mexico City, for her to get back in touch with her Mexican roots, because her family is 3 or 4 generations in the US. And I wanted to start on my new project, which was to write a proposal and then to start on the book itself. So the first few words, I don't have a copy here, but the first few words of this book were written at a cafe over there on, I think, Medellin, the calle Medellin, where I would go every single day and try to take in the vibes and the feeling of Mexico City, which is one of the best creative environments that I've ever seen. Okay, so I have to stay between there and there. Okay. I don't know of a more creative place than sitting in a cafe in Mexico City, in Condesa or Roma or somewhere, and just listening and feeling the energy of this place. So that's the first reason that this is very special. There's something in this book that has the DNA of Mexico City. There's another reason it's special, which is I was actually here in Centro 5 years ago. When we moved here at the beginning of 2019, I got on Twitter, which is what I always do when I go to a new place, and I asked if anyone knew of any interesting people in Mexico City that I could meet. And several people answered or introduced me to someone. Jorge here was someone I met when I first moved here. I didn't even know that he teaches at Centro. I also met Carla Paniagua. I actually don't know if she still teaches here. She does? Okay. So someone introduced me to her. She received us here, and she gave us a tour of Centro. And I still remember, I was just beginning to work on this book, but I remember walking in that Central Park area and just imagining and dreaming, what if one day I have this book and I have it in Spanish and I can come back here to this amazing campus with these amazing people that I'm meeting, and I can actually give a talk on my work. That was 5 years ago, and here we are. Yes. So there's actually a third reason, which is I feel very at home in this crowd. When I started my career in my mid-20s, I worked for a consulting firm. It was a small French consulting firm in their office in San Francisco. I was the most junior person. I was like a junior assistant project manager, the lowest person in the hierarchy. And we did consulting for companies that was very much at the intersection of design and technology. So we would design things for them. We had a team of designers, engineers, software developers. We would design websites or apps or other digital experiences, sometimes even hardware devices. One time we designed an electric car. So we were the ones that brought the design skills and then turned them into something real, turned them into something that was usually technology-based. And we were doing this for clients, which were some of the biggest companies in the world. For car companies, toy companies, pharmaceutical companies, telecommunications companies. So in another way, the DNA of this book, when you think of what a second brain is, I really think of the designer at the table or at the computer who has a need, who has a demand, una demanda, Come up with a good idea. Have you ever had someone ask you that? Design something cool. Design something interesting. Just come up with something creative. And you're just like, well, what does that mean? What is that? Like, you can't just, it's so hard to just come up with something good as a designer, especially something that has to be not only creative, but useful and functional and to meet certain requirements and certain needs. And so I talked to my father. When I was in that situation, I talked to my dad. My dad's name is Wayne. He was has been one of the main inspirations for my work because he's an artist. He's a painter, has been a painter of paintings, large-scale paintings, since he was 5 years old. And I asked him, okay, you were an artist your entire life for 65 years, 70 years. You were an artist the whole time. And not only were you an artist, but you paid the bills. You made an income and raised 4 children in Southern California. It's not easy. Not easy to lead a creative career that is also financially stable. And he began to tell me about his notes. And I always noticed he had a notebook with him all the time, a little paper notebook. As a kid, you don't really care about what your parents are doing. You just take it for granted. But he began to tell me and show me that he always kept notes. He always kept notes everywhere. We would go to church every Sunday. And during the sermon, he's there sketching the biblical story that the pastor is telling. He's creating the scenes in his notebook. He's practicing his drawing. Usually after church, we would go to a museum, usually a modern art museum. Our 2 churches, we had religious church and we had art church. And he would go there, and he was partially giving us an education in art, but also he was looking for inspiration constantly. And it could be something so small. As creatives, you probably know this. Sometimes it was a color. You know, he would see a color, oh, that burnt orange. Now that gives me an idea for my painting that I'm stuck on. Or it was a quote, or it was a poem, or it was the food that we would have afterwards, or it was a piece of architecture. Usually, we grew up in Orange County, and we would drive up to Los Angeles, which is a big city, much bigger than where we were from. And so we would see big buildings, and we would see street art, and we would see different cultures and different colors. That was our education as children, but it was also his creative fuel as an artist. Okay, so that's some backstory. What does this have to do with Second Brains? What does this have to do with my book? And what does this have to do with you? I think, in a way, my father was just ahead of his time. As an artist, he had to create his own system. He had to figure out how to find creative sources. Fast forward to 2024, I think that's all of us. That's every single one of us. When I talk to people about their work, all I see is creativity. Everywhere I look, whether they're designers or engineers or analysts or writers, they can be in a traditional creative career or something that doesn't seem creative at all. I have spoken to truck drivers, like long-haul truck drivers that go across the United States. There is creativity in their work. They have to figure out how to do the maintenance, how to stay safe, find places to sleep, find places to eat, find ways to entertain themselves. Even in that job, there's creativity. Therefore, I think the little kind of weird practice that my father had of creative note-taking is now something that we all need to do, is really essential, especially for people like you that are going into design and technology fields. Okay, so I want to tell you a bit about the story of building a second brain, like where it came from more specifically. And then I want to leave you with 3 takeaways, okay? I don't want you to just leave here with some nice stories or even just some inspiration, but I want to give you 3 ideas, 3, not just ideas, 3 actions that you can put to use like immediately, like tonight. And they're the 3 best ideas that I have. okay? I encourage you to buy my book. I think there's some right over there. They're also at all the librerias. But in case you don't, that's fine. I'm going to give you just the 3 most powerful ideas that I've found from writing this book, from teaching my course that's been taken by more than 5,000 people all over the world, from my YouTube channel. There's 3 keys that you can really use to start building your second brain, but really to change your relationship to information. Sound good? Okay. One question before I do that. How many of you already know or are familiar with the concept of a second brain? Okay, just a few. And how many of you are this is a completely new concept to you? Okay, good. That helps. All right, okay. I know I just said a lot about my background, but there's a little more. This all started for me when I was 22. I know many of you are maybe around 22, a little younger, a little older, so maybe that's a familiar age. I was just finishing college, and I had the biggest hopes and dreams for my life. I was a little naive, a little innocent, but I had just the biggest plans. I was going to be an amazing entrepreneur. I was going to start businesses. I was going to travel the world. I had nothing but hope and optimism and ambition for my future. At the time, I worked at the Apple Store. The Apple Store in Fashion Valley, San Diego, which at the time was one of the 5 busiest Apple stores in the whole world. And I would sell people computers and later iPhones, and also teach classes. Has anyone ever taken a class at an Apple Store? A few of you? Okay. Yeah, they have classes. How to use, at the time, there was the iLife programs. It was a really cool time. It was the first time every personal computer came with software, creative software, to make photo albums, to make movies, to make websites, to make music albums, to make all these amazing things. And so I got to sit down and teach people how to do these things. And it always amazed me that everyone has a creative project, right? Whether it's for their work or not, whether they take it very seriously or not, whether they're actively working on it or not, somewhere in the background, there's something they want to create. Sometimes a website or a business or a product or an event or a service or whatever it is. And now they could start doing that. That was my first taste of using computers, not just to send emails and look up maps, but to create something new. It's a huge moment. But then something happened to me, which was really unexpected and unwanted and completely threw my life off track. All those hopes and dreams and plans, I thought I'm going to make my plan for my life and everything is going to go just as I expect. Well, that didn't happen. Okay, because one day, this was June of 2007. I was 22. I started feeling something in the back of my throat, like a little pain. And when you're 22, you don't go to the doctor. You're just like, whatever, I'll just ignore it. And I did ignore it for days and then weeks. But eventually, it got worse and worse and worse over a period of many months. It got so bad that I could hardly speak. I couldn't laugh. I couldn't sing. It felt like when I woke up in the morning, like there was a vice or like a rope around my neck, just like squeezing me. And so I eventually started seeing doctors and more specialists. I think I eventually saw something like 12 different doctors in 3 different countries. And they did every kind of test you can imagine. Every scan, every MRI, every radioactive, whatever procedure, they did everything they could. And they found nothing, like 0. And really what they told me is, this is just in your mind. This is just, there's no evidence here that anything is going wrong. So just, just bear with it. Just do your best. Basically, they were giving me no solution. Eventually, the pain got so bad that a neurologist gave me one last resort. He said, there's nothing we can do but take this pill, which was a medication called carbamazepine. Carbamazepine is a very powerful anti-seizure medication. It's usually used to treat schizophrenics. And it has the effect of just numbing your entire nervous system. It's like turning off your nervous system so that at least the pain goes away. Okay? And I took it. No questions asked. I said, turn off nervous system, sign me up, give it to me. Because I was so desperate. Little did I know, there was a side effect. There was a side effect that no one had told me, no one had warned me, which was severe short-term memory loss. So within a few months of taking it, I began to notice entire memories had completely disappeared. Books that I read, classes I took, conversations I had had, even entire vacations that I had taken. I was living at the time in Ukraine, serving in the Peace Corps, which is a US volunteer program. I was an English teacher. And so at the time, I turned to my friend Allison, who was also serving, and I said, Allison, you know, we're pretty close. We should go to Moscow. Get on a train in Kyiv and go and visit Moscow. It would be a cool opportunity. And she looks at me and she says, Tiago, we just went to Moscow like 2 months ago. And she showed me this photo. And I didn't remember it. It was like looking at someone else's photos of someone else's life. So I was faced with a choice, and I wonder what you would choose. If you had to decide every day between being pain-free, so being able to have no pain on one side, or having access to your memories, which one would you choose? Your memories or being pain-free? At the end of my talk, I will tell you which one I chose, but just think about that for a minute. Fast forwarding to today, I'm actually grateful that this happened. It took me many years, a lot of therapy, a lot of psychedelic therapy, a lot of retreats, a lot of meditation, a lot of work to get to this point. But I arrived at a place where I'm grateful that this happened to me because it set the stage for my career, set the stage for my work, because it gave me a window into the future. Okay? It gave me a preview of what I think now, all these years later, all of us are experiencing, which is a world where you can't rely on your own mind. It's a world of so much information from so many sources coming at us 24/7, all the time. And now they're even weaponized. They're algorithms designed to change our minds, designed to get us to believe conspiracy theories, designed to get us to buy stuff. Or maybe they're, you know, from foreign adversaries with political messages. It is an absolutely crazy situation for us to be in a world of information overload all day, every day. And it's funny, you can reach different conclusions. You can say, we need to let go of technology and just destroy all the technology. But I came away with a different conclusion, which was, if you can't rely on your body, if your body is not working, you can, in a sense, create another body. You can actually create another mind. You can create an external support system using, for example, software that is not weaponized against you, that is not created by someone else trying to control you, but that is yours. You design, you control. No one can put anything else there or say anything about what goes in there. And that is what led to the idea of a second brain. When you live in a world, so it's funny, the last time our brains changed, the last major evolution was 200,000 years ago when we lived here. So if you really look at your brain, what was it designed for? Is this. Everything about it is designed for this, okay? And we're trying to live 21st century lives that are incredibly complex with Paleolithic brains. Paleolithic hardware trying to run 21st century software. It doesn't work. So when I talk about a second brain, a lot of times people go, whoa, cool, like futuristic technology, you know, they think of this. They think, oh yes, the future. But I'm not talking about the future. I'm not talking about androids or cyborgs. I'm not talking about artificial intelligence. I'm not talking about implanting, you know, devices in your brain like Neuralink. All of that will come, I'm sure. But I'm talking about a technology that is thousands of years old. I'm talking about a practice that you already know how to do and very likely already do in some way. Okay, so no futuristic technology, just something that humans have done for many thousands of years, which is take notes. Taking notes. Except we're going to do it a little bit differently, which is we're going to do it digitally. Okay, so the ancient practice of note-taking, thousands of years old. In English, if you look, the word note is one of the 2% oldest words in the entire English language. I suspect in Spanish it's probably the same. It's ancient. We're going to do that, except with software. All right? So this is the question that I've been trying to answer for the past 15 years. This is the question that my book answers. And this is the question I'm going to give you 3 practical takeaways for. How do we reinvent this ancient, timeless practice of note-taking that was relevant in the past, is relevant now, will be relevant far into the future, but in a modern, connected way? 3 takeaways. Okay. The first one is taking your notes everywhere. This is really the power of the smartphone, right? The smartphone that you keep with you all the time, that you always have with you, means that you don't have to have this one paper notebook that you carry with you all the time, and then, oh, I forgot it, or where is it, or you lose it, or it gets stolen in your backpack, or some water falls on it, or the dog eats it, and these are things that have really happened to me. The kids come and scribble all over it, right? Paper is so fragile. Paper disappears. Paper can get lost. With software, with specifically mobile apps, we can so there's 2 senses. Take notes in the first place anywhere. If you have an idea, if you have an insight, if you come across a source of inspiration, a creative reference, a little piece of a creative work that you can borrow for yourself, you always have that thing with you and you can write it down, which also means you can also find it anytime. It's the same place where you wrote it down. It's in your phone. Okay. And the reason I have this as a takeaway is this sometimes takes a few steps. Okay. For example, make sure that you have a note-taking app. Sometimes it comes pre-installed. If you have an Apple device, you have Apple Notes. But if you have an Android device, you might need to download Samsung Notes or Google Keep or whatever it is, or Microsoft device, Microsoft OneNote. Or you can download a third-party app. I'm actually curious. Actually, I'd like to know this. How many of you have or use Apple Notes? Any Apple Notes users? Okay, perfect. Any Android Notes, Samsung Notes, Google Keep, Android solutions? Okay, cool. Microsoft OneNote, that one's older, but anyone? Cool. And then there's the third-party ones, all the startups, right? Anyone use Evernote? Okay, that's the one I use. Okay, it's kind of been around a long time now. Any Notion users? Okay, designers, of course. Any Obsidian or Roam Research users? Awesome. Okay, the true nerds. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Take a few steps. Make sure you have it. Make sure you know how to use it. Just the most basic functionality. Do you know how to create a new note and write something down? Just try it. Practice it. Is it accessible? Put it on your first screen of your phone. Put it on the dock at the bottom. Put it on a shortcut on the lock screen so you don't even have to unlock your phone in order to take a note. These are little steps, but seeing that little note icon, you're going to be always reminded, oh, have I had any interesting ideas the past hour, the past 10 minutes? And then you'll have the opportunity to write those down. So here's the funny thing, is you are already capturing and saving tons of information, right? Wow. How many of you read books? Okay. How many of you, keep your hands up if you read ebooks, electronic books? Okay. So you are consuming lots of information. How many of you read online articles, blog posts, newspaper articles? Just as many. How many of you, it says note, but how many of you do like journal entries or personal reflections or anything like that? Perfect. How many are on social media? Okay. How many of you listen to podcasts? And how about YouTube videos? Anyone watch YouTube videos? And of course, the web, we all browse the web, right? So think about this. You are already, according to the research, consuming something like 30 gigabytes a day. Every one of you, 30 gigabytes a day of information. Okay, if you get all the text and all the images and all the videos, everything. So you're already consuming it. All I'm saying is get the 1% that is best, that is most original and insightful and valuable, and just put it in your pocket. Just save it for later, okay? So your second brain is just the default place where it goes, right? Often you think, oh, I heard, let's say you're out to dinner with a friend and they say, conversation, by the way, is one of the best sources of insight. Do you ever have a conversation, you're at dinner, you're at lunch, and someone just says something, you go, oh, I never thought of it that way, right? Instead of being like, oh gosh, do I send an email to myself? Do I put it in WhatsApp? Do I, create a new Google Doc, a Word document? Like there's so many options. Your digital notes app becomes the default. If you don't have time to think and make that decision, just put it in the notes app. The powerful thing about notes app is they can receive anything. They can receive text, you can copy and paste, they can receive images, links, PDFs, GIFs, attachments, diagrams, anything you can imagine can be put into a notes app. Okay, that's the first takeaway. Just get set up, just get ready. Second takeaway, what do you save? It's a big question people have. What should I capture in my notes? And I want to give you a rule of thumb that saved me, well, if I had had this, it would have saved me years. There was a time where I tried to make that decision analytically. I tried to use logic. That does not work. Okay? It doesn't work. Because in your busy life, when you have 30 seconds after you buckle your kid in the car seat and you're just walking around to the other side of the car, you don't have time for logic. When you're in a meeting and your boss says something interesting, gives you some feedback, you don't have time to go through a flow chart with 15 steps. You have to use, instead of logic, your intuition. You have to make the decision of what to save intuitively because there's no time for anything else. What does that mean? Is you can look for signs. Look for what moves you, what makes you feel something. Look for what makes the hair stand up on your arm, or what makes your heart beat faster or slower, or what makes your eyes dilate, or what makes you catch your breath, or what makes time slow down. All these are signs. Think about what's happening. All you're doing is encountering some information. You're hearing a song, or seeing a piece of art, or having a conversation with a friend. That's all just information. But that information is touching something so deep within you that there's a somatic reaction. Your body is actually being impacted by that information. That is a great sign that you should save that. Okay? It doesn't have to be a lot. It can be one line of a quote, one photo that you take on your phone. It can be part of a poem. It can be a screenshot of a website. It can be a segment of a YouTube video, anything. But pay attention to what resonates with you, what echoes in your soul. Another way of saying this is the single best indicator of when to save something is if it surprises you. If it surprises you. And this is big for people because what I've noticed is with all the content that we consume, over time, I've noticed that people tend to only consume things they already know or already agree with. right? Designers read design books, engineers read engineering books, people who are into politics read more politics. Like whatever we're interested in, we just go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into that topic. But what that means over time is it doesn't surprise us. We've heard it all, we've seen it all, it's all the same old stuff. But think about it. If a piece of information doesn't surprise you, then you already knew it, right? If it doesn't surprise you, you either already knew it or you could have guessed. Therefore, there's no point in saving it. This really frees you as you read books or whatever it is. You don't have to save every fact, every detail, every idea. Don't do that. Only save the ideas that you go, whoa, I never thought about it that way. I never saw the world that way. I never considered that. This fact blows my mind. Those are the things to save. And that will also help you filter, because there's actually not that many things that genuinely surprise you, right? Sometimes I read a whole book from beginning to end and nothing surprised me. And therefore I have no notes on that book. It's fine. So that's the second takeaway. Don't try to save it all. Don't try to be comprehensive. Don't try to take good notes like you did in school, because there's no test, there's no teacher, there's no grade. No one is going to check whether you took notes, how complete those notes are. The only benefit is to make you feel good, honestly, to make you feel creative and inspired and motivated and engaged with life. That's the only point of all this. And third, okay, this line is supposed to be, it looks like I'm saying don't do that, but it's actually should be up here. I think the font got messed up. So this is kind of the best one, or the biggest one. What I find is people in this world who are into design and technology and different things like this, who are very digitally savvy, which I get the sense that all of you are, very online centric, very connected, very tech savvy. Usually our problem is not that we're not consuming enough or that we're not saving enough. Usually the problem is we're saving too much. Okay? Do you know this, I don't know this word in Spanish, but in English, hoarding, hoarders? Do you know this word? It's like those TV shows where you open the door to the house and they have stuff, pizza boxes and trash and toys, all these things piled to the ceiling, right? And you think, oh, how can they live like that? It's disgusting. I bet most of you in your digital life are like that. Anyone willing to admit it? I know sometimes I am, right? It's like, it's very funny to me. I'll go to someone's house and it's so minimalistic and beautifully designed and tasteful. And then I open up their computer and it's a huge chaotic disaster, right? So this is the answer to that. If you've ever thought, how do I organize all of this? How do I organize, and not just your notes, everything, your documents, your internet bookmarks, your photos, videos, your everything. This little mindset shift for the people that have consumed my content and read my books is the most important one. So what most people try to do is they try to organize by topic. And I think we learn that from libraries, right? You go to a library and you go, oh, political science, sociology, I don't know, history. And we think, oh, that's the right way to organize information, right? And it is for a library. If you're organizing information for like a whole town, a whole city, you should do it that way. But here's the problem. If you have in your second brain, on your computer, these big categories, like sometimes I'll see people have a folder or a tag for business. It's like business, as if it's just one thing, right? Or they'll have, psychology, or they'll have, even design, as if design is just one thing. And because these categories are so broad, they fill up with tons of stuff, right? Like think about it. If you're interested in human psychology, how much stuff is there going to be in the human psychology folder? It's just going to be an endless pile, right? And here's the problem with that. When the moment comes to retrieve that information, let's say you're writing a paper or you're giving a presentation or you're having a meeting with your colleagues and you want to surface that research, you absolutely do not have time to open up a category called business and look through hundreds or maybe even thousands of documents. You just don't have time. So much of this comes back to not having time, right? That is the most scarce resource. We just don't have time. Here's what I advise you to do instead, okay? Remember that the only reason you're saving information is to accomplish things. And this is sometimes controversial because people say, no, I'm just a curious person. I just like learning for the sake of learning. And that's wonderful. That's great, right? But even then, I would say there's always some result that we're trying to produce. It could be an experience that we're trying to have, an outcome that we're trying to create, an impact we're trying to have, something. Maybe that's just the feeling of having learned something. Even that is an outcome, right? So what I advise you to do is to make a list. Okay, you can do this in 5 minutes. You can do it on paper. Start on paper, actually. Okay, make a list of every one of your active projects right now. What are you working on? They can be school projects, they can be work projects, they can be classes you're taking or teaching, they can be an article you're writing, a design prototype that you're building, a presentation you're making, anything. Okay, I find that almost everyone has around 10 to 15 projects. The average modern professional has around 10 to 15 things that they're trying to accomplish at any given time. And that's both professional and personal, right? Mix them together. You might have, like raise funding for my startup from venture capitalists. And then, this is common. The next one is like fix the broken toilet in the bathroom in our house, right? As humans, those exist side by side. And sometimes one is just as hard as the other. In fact, house projects for me are some of the most challenging projects that I do. So make a list of the projects, and then in your note-taking app, create one folder, or if your app uses tags, one tag for each one of your projects. That's it. Again, you'll have around 10 to 15, which is important because you can keep in mind 10 to 15 things. 10 to 15 is not an overwhelming number. And they're easy to keep in mind because you're working on them. They're not some abstract category. It's things that you're trying to do right now, right? Once you do that, every time you save a note or any piece of information, you only have time to ask one question. Sometimes people go, okay, for every note that I take, I'm gonna give it a title, and then I'm gonna tag it, and then I'm going to put in a little like bullet point summary, and then I'm gonna link it to the other notes. You don't have time for that. I promise you, that's gonna break down. You have time for one question. So what is the best question that you can ask about every note? I think it's this. What project is this gonna help me move forward? What project is this most relevant to? In what project is this going to solve a problem for me, or prevent some pain, or help me make progress? With that decision, and again, there's only 10 to 15 choices, you can get that note or document or whatever it is and just move it into that folder. Then, and this is the last part, when the time comes to work on that project, you have one place to look. There's one folder to open that has all the information related to that project. You don't have to spend 45 minutes gathering, Google Drive over here and the project management software, and there's something in email, something in my bookmarks. It's all in that one place. That has been the best way I've found to help people organize really their entire digital lives. That technique is called Para, P-A-R-A. You can find actually a series of videos on my YouTube channel if you want to know more, or there's an article on my blog that gets into more detail into what that looks like. And it's in the book as well. And here's what it looks like. This is my note-taking app. Okay, this is the most important categories that I think about. I'm trying to have a budget meeting with my team. My family is visiting me. Always a big project. We're doing a renovation of our home. I'm participating in a jiu-jitsu tournament. Simple, almost everyday things. And this is what I'm capturing notes on. You're probably wondering what happened with my story. After a few years, it's probably 3-4 years, of going from doctor to doctor to doctor. There was this moment when I was sitting in the doctor's waiting room, waiting for an appointment, and I just realized, oh, no one is going to come in and save me. No one is going to rescue me from this. I had been waiting for a doctor, in a white lab coat to come in, like my savior, and say, okay, I found it. This is your problem. This is your condition. Take this pill or do this procedure or whatever it is, and you'll never have to think about it again. And I realized that I had to take ownership. I had to really take responsibility for how I was feeling. I had to basically become the leader and have agency over what I was feeling in my body. So the way I did that was I went to the receptionist, walked up to the receptionist, and I asked her, can I have my patient record? And she was like, what do you mean? I was like, I want all the documents that you have on me as a patient. And this is a very unusual thing to do, because by then it was like one of these. It was like a mountain of paper, right? And usually as patients, you don't even see your patient record. I don't know how it is here, but in the United States, only the doctor looks at that. You sit in your chair and they look at your data and they tell you what you should do and why you're feeling how you're feeling. And I said, wait a minute, I need to look at this information. So she said, okay, I'll make copies. And she sat for a long time and made a lot of copies. And I took home this big stack of papers. I took it home and I saw, okay, this isn't going to work. This is an insane amount of paper. And so I started scanning those documents. You remember those old scanners? It's like one page at a time. It took me many days. I didn't have that fast feeder thing. I was just one page on my parents' on my parents' scanner. But then once I did that, a world opened up, because once it was digital, I could search it. I could say, show me every time that nutrition has been mentioned. Show me every time that I was given, a test or a scan. I could start to annotate it. I could start to take notes, my own notes, not just the doctor's notes, but my notes on what was working, what was not working, what I had tried, what I had not tried, what was the effect of that medication, what was the effect of that change. I started to actually understand what was going on. And to my amazement, I started to notice connections and patterns. And because I had all the information, I started to see, oh, when I make just a few simple lifestyle changes, I get better. And incredibly, no doctor had ever told me this. No doctor ever said, oh, you just need to improve your self-care. But I found it was a lot of trial and error experimentation, if I slept better, if I ate better, this is all like news to a 20-something, right? It's like, if I eat better, don't drink as much alcohol, if I meditate, I took a medication, if I just take care of myself better, or in other words, actually paid attention to my mental health and my physical health, the symptoms kind of disappeared. Not completely, but they got much better, right? So I effectively didn't take any of those two paths. I took a third path, which was to try to heal myself by just giving my body and my mind what it needed, which in hindsight is so obvious. Everyone is probably thinking, well, duh, that's so obvious, but the medical system is not designed that way. That approach, that philosophy, that you can take control of your life, you can gather all the relevant information, you can organize it, you can make sense of it, you can study it, you can distill it, you can make it into something of your own, is the basis of the work in this book. I used that same approach to get my first job, which happened a couple years later. Used it to get, actually before that, used it to graduate with honors from my university. Used it to get my first job. Used it to start my blog and start writing. Used it to start a business. And today, I'm using really the same approach to consult with companies and create products and all sorts of different things. And what I want to leave you with is just a question. I wonder, a lot of this is like, oh, it's kind of interesting, but like, I don't have time for this. This is like some crazy Silicon Valley thing that's like too fancy and technical, whatever. What does this have to do with me? And what I would ask you is, what challenge or problem are you facing in your life right now? It could be a health problem like me. It could be a relationship problem. It could be a problem in your work, a problem in your studies, a problem in your neighborhood, a problem that the information, the answers are already out there. Someone has them. They exist. The answers exist in some book, some podcast interview, some research study, some university, some class. All that's waiting for you to do is to have the will and the intention to go out, find that information, bring it into your own environment, and start to work with it. So in other words, what is a problem or a challenge in your life that you're facing right now that this might actually be the solution for, even if it's not the kind of solution that you were expecting? And that's all. Thank you. So I think we're going to do Q&A.
Hi, my name is Mariana.
Oh.
Pleased to meet you. So I was wondering, here at Centro, we are characterized for being a really creative university, as you know. And us, for instance, that are on digital media, per se, we have to apply our creativity a lot. We're often tasked with creating projects all of the time, different subjects, that all require creativity applied in different manners. So how do you face creative burnout? And even when you have the information, you don't know how to make the connections to your projects or just overall to start.
Yeah. I think creative burnout is a really important topic. Let me see how I can draw a connection. Okay. So I'm sorry. It's interesting. If you look at the research on burnout, it's really interesting. It's not that you're working too many hours, right? It's not the people that just are working the hardest, the longest that are burning out. It tends to be when you're working in a way that doesn't fit how your mind works, right? Some people, just as some examples, need a lot of quiet time to think. Well, if you're in a noisy office with an open plan floor plan, they have constant noise, constant people interrupting you, you're never going to be happy. You're never going to do your best work, and you're going to burn out. If you need some people, for example, another example, you need a lot of feedback and support. You need other people to see your work, validate it, support you. If you're not receiving that, you're going to feel burnt out. Or it can be a lack of a sense of purpose. If it's very important to you that you have a sense of purpose and you're lacking that, you're going to burn out. So I would draw a connection to the second brain, which is this. There's no one-size-fits-all second brain system. There's no one-size-fits-all way to take digital notes. It really, really has to fit how your mind works, which is this is kind of one of the big discoveries that we're making now is neurodivergence, right? I don't know if that's a trend here, but we're slowly discovering, people's brains work super differently. It's not just like there's ADHD, people who have ADHD, but that's just one thing. There's like dozens or hundreds of different ways that people's minds work. And sometimes you can't control it. If you work at a company that uses, Asana or Basecamp, you have to use the software. But with your digital notes app, you don't. You can use whatever you want. You can use an app that everyone else thinks is terrible if it fits the way your mind works. I think with this kind of software, you have more agency and more control than any other kind of software, any other kind of technology. And I would say that choosing technology that fits the way your mind works can have a positive impact on creative burnout. Yeah.
And, as a follow-up, just we're often told that we need to choose like one specific thing to focus our creativity to. Like us in creative computing science, we're told like, you need to choose what you're going to focus on, like programming, animating, Do you think that's necessary to fully develop your creativity?
I think there's of course a lot of value in focus, but one of the most important ideas that I ever came across for my career was the idea that your career, and really your life, but let's just say your career, works in seasons. It's all seasons. There's no linear, the graph of like, I'm going to start here and just make a perfect straight line of progress and just move forward 100% of the time. You have seasons. Some seasons are productive, some are not. Some seasons are creative, some are not. You know, summer seasons tend to be and spring and summer, things are blooming. Have you ever had a period of your life where it's like spring? Everything is new, everything is starting. You're having new relationships, new friendships, going new places. Everything is happening, everything is moving forward. And it feels effortless, it feels natural. That's spring. But then there's also winter. And winter, I think, is not something to be feared. It's something to be celebrated. You know, nature needs winter. We also, as creatives, need winter. There needs to be seasons that you rest, you go dormant, you don't create, you don't progress, you don't innovate or disrupt. You are just recuperating. And so I would say focus for a season. And I even like to pick a time period. You know, focus for the next month. For the next 30 days, I'm only going to focus on animation. Or for the next 6 weeks, I'm only going to learn, UX design. You can even set the time period, get to the end of that time period, but then step back and ask yourself if you want to continue, right? You can extend that season. You can go to many times I find I like to go to the complete opposite. Okay, that was a season of focus. Now I'm going to go to a season where I just follow 100 different rabbit trails and just follow whatever my curiosity says. That's the kind of subtlety or the detail that I would add to that advice.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Tiago. I used to study here the Master in Innovation and Creativity. And I want to ask you a simple and maybe dumb question, but it's most an advice. How do you keep your notes like in order? I know that the answer, maybe it's obvious and it's discipline to just order all of the information that you track, but how you keep attached to this order and don't lose focus on every note that you take? I mean, I take a lot of notes, but sometimes I don't know how to order all of them. So maybe, as you said, it's like a lot of information and I don't need all of that. But how do you keep track of this order in all of your information?
Yeah, it's funny. I was raised American and Brazilian. My dad is American, my mom is Brazilian. And at one point I noticed that I almost have like a split identity. I have like an American mode, like a mindset that I can go into, and then there's a Brazilian mode. And they're so distinct. It's almost like a split personality. It's like I go, and then it's like a whole different lens on the world. And I've spent a lot of time in the US and Brazil and kind of tested the different modes. And there's a lot to that. But what I found is the American mode is structured. And for situations where you need structure, you need order, you need efficiency, there's no mindset that's better than the American. I mean, that is the superpower of the American mindset. But Brazilians also have a superpower, which is how to operate within uncertainty, how to operate when you have no idea what's going on, how to work within chaos. I mean, the Brazilian mindset, there's a term in Portuguese called jogo de cintura, which is the game of the hips, which is they encounter an obstacle, like you've probably seen in soccer, in samba. They encounter an obstacle, and instead of stopping, they do a move that just gets them around that thing, right? And I actually think that the way the world is going, the Brazilian mode is getting more important. The Latin way is getting more important because the world is getting less certain, more chaotic, more unpredictable. There's more risk, there's more change, all these things. There's more disorder, there's more chaos. And so even in my life, I notice as time passes, I rely on my Brazilian mode more and more and more. Even like in business is getting less predictable. The streets are getting less predictable. Crime is less predictable. Everything, society is less predictable. So what I would question is this. It's almost like there's an assumption that more order is better. You know, that the assumption is, oh, if my notes or my information, my documents are more organized, that's better. I don't think that's the case. I think order is almost like, it's like an ingredient in something that you're cooking, right? It's like salt. You taste the soup, oh, it needs salt. You put in some salt, still needs some. You put in some salt, but then you reach a point where you can put in too much. And actually, when I work with especially smart people, probably at least half the time, they're too organized, which means they're too rigid. They're trying to be too perfect, too precise, too consistent. And what they actually need, and this is what I try to do for them, I try to inject some disorder into their digital life. I try to inject some chaos, right? Now, with some systems, you can't do that, right? Like the software that runs the city lights for the traffic lights, let's not inject some chaos into those, right? But this is what's so cool about notes. No one else cares. No one else is looking at those. No, you're not going to get in trouble. No one else is going to be affected. So I really think your personal notes should be pretty chaotic, pretty disordered, or have just enough order that you can move things forward. To me, that's the real test. It's not, are you organized? Are you disorganized? I don't know what that means. It's, are you making progress? Are you doing what you said you would do? Are you doing your best work? Are you doing your best thinking? When you say something is going to happen, especially as a creative, that's what we're always doing. We're saying, I'm going to put on an exhibition. I'm going to make a film. I'm going to write this book. And it's rare to find someone that actually does what they said they would do. To me, that's what a second brain is. It's like a support system for actually getting your creative visions into the real world and bringing them to completion. And for that, you need some order, but you also need some chaos.
Thank you.
Gracias. Hi, Tiago. Thank you so much for your presentation. I have a question about, do you still take physical notes? And if you do, how do you make the digital notes and the physical notes work with each other? And I have a second question, but do you want to answer that one first? Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely take physical notes. I think this is the amazing thing is you don't have to choose. Okay, this isn't a religion. It's not a political philosophy like I have to choose this way or that way, and the other way is wrong and bad. They're just tools, right? Like think of a construction worker that has hammers and screwdrivers and different tools, wrenches. They don't become ideological about, no, I'm only going to use the hammer. They use the right tool for the job. There are some jobs I think digital notes are far better suited. For example, taking notes from books. This was one of the big moments for me when I realized that I could read a Kindle book, and this is a great place to start, by the way, and make highlights. You put your finger and you go like that and you make a highlight. And then at the end of the book, when I had read the whole book, I can just export every single one of those highlights into my digital notes app. I saw that and I thought, oh my God, this is going to completely change my life. Because now, after some time has passed, I can actually I can go back and tell you what I read in a book 10 years ago. If you don't have a system like that, you can't, right? But there's other situations where paper is far better. For example, meetings. For a while, I was taking digital notes in meetings, and I would be on my computer, on my tablet, on my phone. But then I noticed the people, they're like, what are you doing on your phone? And I would be like, oh, no, I'm not texting. I'm taking notes. And I would show them, but it doesn't matter. There's something, and there's actually research that if there's a device in the room, even if it's off, even if it's face down, it's going to be distracting to you and to them. So I have a rule now. If I'm with people, it's paper notes. I do not take digital notes when I'm trying to be, the whole point of being with people is to be present with them. right? And so in order to do that, I prefer paper, but then I digitize them. To answer your question, the technology on this has gotten so good. I just published a YouTube video about 2 weeks ago about how you can use ChatGPT. You can take a photo, upload it to ChatGPT and say, turn this into digital text. And it will read your handwriting, even if your handwriting is very messy, give you the transcript, and then you export that to your notes.
Thank you. And just an advice, because I think I've been studying the second brain for a while, and I always find myself, I don't know, trying to be a perfectionist, I guess. So does it ever end, perfecting the system? Or is it like a forever process that you go on through the rest of your life? Do you have anything about that?
It definitely never ends. I kind of think of it as your creative practice itself. The goal is not to end. The goal is to have it keep going, right? And I think of all this stuff. All this is really just infrastructure. This is not an end in itself, right? This is what always keeps my perfectionism in check, is as I'm taking notes and organizing my notes and summarizing my notes and distilling, in my mind, in the back of my mind, I tell myself, this is not creating value. There's no value being created here. Reorganizing my little notes for the 10th time is literally not creating any value for anyone in the entire world. What creates value? And the only thing that creates value is when I get those ideas and actually do something with them. Otherwise, I think you really can spend your life, you can spend years trying to create the perfect system. Or in other words, find the perfect process, or find the right tool, or find the right medium, or whatever the right thing is, which is all that is just a huge excuse for procrastination. It really, at the end of the day, you have to face your art and you have to take a risk. And no amount of preparation and logistics is going to make that fear. It really comes down to fear and trying to avoid fear.
Muy bien, muchísimas gracias, Tiago.
Muchas gracias. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Agradecemos profundamente tu participación con nosotros y estar con nosotros. A todos ustedes, muchísimas gracias por asistir. Para los que están interesados en algún programa nuestro, Karina de promoción está por aquí, si alguien quiere preguntar algo de nuestros programas. Y también la editorial Urano también tiene en la venta el libro de Tiago, entonces por si alguno de ustedes también tiene interés, pues puede adquirirlo. Tiago estará también por acá si tienen alguna pregunta. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias a todos. Excelente.
A partir de la maestría hice mi emprendimiento y hoy mi emprendimiento ya se está convirtiendo en una empresa. La maestría me dio las bases para crear un emprendimiento de una manera consolidada y enfocada. La parte creativa es muy importante, pero si no tienes todo el plan estratégico y cómo vas a llegar a ser un emprendimiento funcional, no sirve de nada. Soy Nelly y estudié la maestría en negocios, innovación y creatividad en Centro.